The theme of this presentation, which is accelerating the digital journey. Matt and I looked back and we caught up with all the great work that CNIS is doing. And it occurred to us that what we're doing in our startups in the tech world very much should be mirrored, ideally, in nonprofits, in charities, and NGOs, which is basically how can one embrace some of the new emerging technologies in an effective fashion so that one can drastically accelerate what one is doing in the context of the digital realm. And so I don't think it would be surprising to this audience that tech companies and companies in general are all sitting down and saying, well, we want to do 100x of what we were doing previously with the same resources that we have right now. And looking at, for example, the budget of CNIS, and I think we were kind of spies in the meeting, so apologies. We came at 9 because we thought we would start at 9, so sorry for seeing all that information. But it occurs to us that in the context of this digital acceleration, there's an opportunity to look at, with finite resources, how we can amplify those resources effectively in order to achieve the objectives of the organization in terms of widespread, scalable, and accessible global surgical education. And so what we thought to structure this is proposing a 4-month pilot. And that's very tactical on our part, because what we want to do is make sure there's a structure around the engagement within a beginning and an end that then opens up the door to more sustainable work, hopefully in this area, assuming that the pilot has achieved some success. In regards to the pilot, first of all, we need to contextualize a little bit. On the Matt and Damon side, both of us, after being in the tech world for quite a bit of time, are now pretty much looking exclusively how can we dedicate our time to social objectives that essentially are not necessarily profit-oriented. And so we, on our side, are in the early inception phase of bringing together an enterprise. It would run sort of as a venture studio. And one of the thematic areas that our focus is on is actually medical education. So that makes a lot of sense for us in regards to this work that we would do with CNIS to basically have real world experience, looking at the real content that's been produced by CNIS, forensically examining it, and then deciding on, in collaboration with the organization, how could we apply these new technologies like artificial generative AI, for example, in the context of accelerating the mission of CNIS. So from our side, in the terms of the pilot, it's very much to see how we could effectively work together in an outcomes-based fashion, and then basically get some evidence from which we can then build on in terms of this journey. On the CNIS side, we've had some dialogue with Ron over the last few weeks, so things are moving pretty fast. I think we first got in touch about 6 weeks ago. And now we're, presenting to the board, so it's an honor to be here. But really, with our CNIS objectives that we've negotiated with Dr. Lett, it is how we can basically have more outputs for CNIS with less resources, or the existing amount of resources that are available. How can we increase the scalability of the content to new and diverse audiences? And how could potentially, with this innovation focus, we unlock new funding opportunities that would be more in what I would consider the non-traditional realm. So sky is the limit in that context when we're looking at, let's say, for example, tech-based funding, where organizations also in the private industry, private enterprises might be interested in contributing to accelerate this kind of work, where we're applying this technology in resource-poor settings, for example. Matt, any top-ups there?
So yeah, as Damon's kind of highlighted throughout, is that we really want to embrace some of this newer technology that we've seen, being in this industry for, probably about 15 years now. Looking at, basically this emergence of newer technology, artificial intelligence. I'm sure some people have seen in the news, but it's really coming to its sort of tipping point where it's a highly influential and able to create and enhance and provide more impactful and immersive learning experiences. Virtual reality is another thing that we'll talk a bit more on, like one of the streams there. That'll be a bit of a stretch, along with the augmented reality piece. But this is all about really going to embracing technology to scale the efforts of CNIS to a larger audience, you know, and do it with the same amount of resources, or potentially yeah, do about 100x what we can normally do. So looking back on like why are we doing this now as opposed to, you know, a couple of years ago, or even, you know, over the last few years with the pandemic, which is kind of a huge explosion of online learning. OpenAI, which is a Silicon Valley based company, they've released one of the largest, most impactful large language models, which is basically a way for, you know, a very advanced, basically AI system. If you've, you know, Dr. Let was showing us, he was playing around with it a lot as well. But it's the Chat GPT is one of the examples of the implementation of that. But we would be able to apply that in a learning focused setting. At Thinkific, we're already doing a ton of this as well, and it's showing really exciting results. But along with that, you're also getting this huge explosion of other companies around the space developing AI innovation that can help us in this sort of journey. The other part is Meta and Apple are making huge investments in VR and AR, and so we're really seeing that point come to a sort of it's like the headsets and the technology are coming to a point where it's actually usable and can actually be applied in scalable, you know, settings, and provide highly immersive learning experience without like the huge amount of costs that were sort of traditionally tied to that area. And that's obviously with the surgical applications and stuff, we're seeing really exciting stuff. And then yeah, obviously, you know, with, you know, Dr. Let, but over the pandemic was the CNS was well positioned because of the digital journey already being put together for the learning experiences, but that there is a huge amount of acceleration of people now already through the pandemic, picking up digital learning, getting used to it, playing with that, you know, experience and understanding how to learn online. So this isn't like a new experience for people. So the behavior of learners has changed a lot in the last sort of 5 years as well. So to present well to this sort of this trend, we think there's a lot of people would be interested in sort of taking advantage of this.
I think a very legitimate criticism of sort of this kind of approach would be, are we just playing with technology because it's fun? Or does this translate into something tangible for the organization in regards to its outreach with global surgical education? Recognizing, for example, that the material conditions, let's say in Uganda, is not necessarily the same as what we would have at UBC here in Vancouver. Of course, there is convergence happening, and through technologies like SpaceX with their satellite, you can get high-speed internet pretty much in most of the world. What we really want to avoid is just playing around with tech because it's cool, but instead being very strategic on how we can apply this technology to objectives. And that's the reason why our focus here is on a pilot as opposed to just doing like an ongoing project. And we really hope we can collaborate with this board and this amazing group to actually analyze the effectiveness of this work, which really fits into 3 streams. So on one stream, we call it the enhancement stream. And that basically says the existing course materials that we have in front of us, how can we use best-in-class Gen AI tools to significantly improve the quality, accessibility, and scalability of the content? So I'll give an example. Ron was involved in this without his consent. I went ahead and took one of his videos, which is on the trauma team training module. And that lesson was on log rolling the patient. And with very little effort on our side and a cost of probably 12 cents, Ron, who does not speak Arabic, all of a sudden now was doing the exact same presentation in Arabic, where his voice and even his mouth motions had been changed, so it looked like he was a native Arabic speaker.
Wow.
And we, you know, sent this to, I don't speak Arabic myself, so I sent this to an Arabic speaker. he was quite impressed with the output. And Ron, I believe you sent this as well to one of your colleagues in Egypt in the WHO, right?
Yeah, I sent it. Yeah, I did send it to Egypt. So do you have it available to show?
I think I can actually, yeah. So I'll just bring that up. Give me 2 seconds. And while I bring that up, I am going to emphasize that that is an example. That's simply an example of what's possible with very, very little effort on our side. So the pilot hasn't even started. And what we're able to do is do this proof of concept on, let's say, translation, which is one of the tools of many that would fit into this Gen AI category of enhancement. Enhancement can also mean taking, for example, text content in a course and translating it into beautiful visuals with audio guidance and even avatars or even sort of fake individuals, but they look real doing the presentation. Again, all about figuring out how can this make it so that the learning experience would be better for the students. And so I'll just pause right now and actually put on the Arabic Ron. Ron, do we have a Arabic pseudonym for you? We could call you Ali on this one, or Amir Let. So let me just share my screen, new share. So I hope you guys can hear this.
مرحبا، إنه الدكتور رونالد جلين. أود عرض توضيحي عن تدوير المريض. مشكلة تواجه المرضى هي استلقائهم على ظهورهم وتفويت إصابات في الظهر إذا لم تنظر بشكل استباقي إلى ظهرهم.
Okay, so I don't think we need to go through the whole video, but you can get the general concept, which is pretty amazing. The cost of this translation
خطر عند فعل ذلك
was 10 cents for this 2 minutes and 46 seconds video clip. And so the idea here is that there are a lot of APIs available to us, interfaces with these generative AI tools. And again, we don't want to be random in our approach. We want to be very strategic and tactical. So if there's a need for a course to be in French, for example, for a French-speaking audience, one can easily do this now. And what we want to do is apply those algorithms against these courses based on direction coming from this team and from Dr. Let to help us actually make sure that these are effective pilots that we're running. I'll just pause there to see if there's any questions so far.
Well, I'd just like to comment on, I sent that video to Egypt to make sure that the Arabic was understandable. And I was told by my colleague Hashem that it was perfect. And he wants more. He would like, like he said that, English is fine for their medical trainees, but for their nurses, it would really be helpful if we could, have all our videos turned into Arabic. And so that's, so I'm thinking of, we have an orthopedic series of simple orthopedics that, and that we could probably send the whole thing. And then we have to look at the issue of, if we post this on YouTube, for example, how do we make sure that people see it? I mean, that's my question for Damon. I mean, I think it looks great. And, it was interesting to hear not only my voice, but even my wife's voice in Arabic. It's not, so it seems absurdly natural.
Yeah.
Sorry, Damon, I had a question. Can you do like Swahili as well, or is it just major languages?
So that's a really good question. So right now, Swahili is not listed as one of the languages that are accessible to us. However, that's the type of work that we would accomplish in this pilot. So it is theoretically possible to get to that point. And it's just about the training models. So what we'd want to do right now with our base technology, it's basically like French, Arabic, Spanish, Italian, Filipino. There's a few different languages that would be useful. Indonesian, for example, but Swahili is very much possible. So really, when it comes to this Gen AI standpoint, it's more a matter of what is our objectives and what are our resources to get to the objectives, but really sky is the limit. And so I just want to emphasize that Ron will be translated into an avatar. We will do that. And he will actually be able to be doing presentations and videos where he's not even being filmed anymore. That's like another example where, again, it's about the acceleration of what's possible. But Hassan, Swahili is an open question for us right now, but I think it's possible, very much possible.
I asked Damon if I could be slightly younger and slimmer.
I'm better looking.
I don't know if it's possible to be better looking than Dr. Let is right now, but in all seriousness, like these questions, we look at a future where the student can choose their preferences. Like, I don't like listening to video content when I'm learning, to be honest with you. I like reading and scanning. And so one can imagine that when you're entering a CNIS course digitally, you can say your preferences, you can say the language that you want, you could say the gender of the instructor that you want, and we're actually naturally producing the outputs. What is happening right now in terms of this explosion of technology is it is amazing what we will be able to do just in the next 12 months. If you think about the next few years, however, we will be able to go from text content to full videos that look realistic, that actually are showing activities. Like, for example, the log rolling right now, one can imagine that we're not that far away using something like Stability, where you could actually produce that without even having filmed the video of the log roll. So part of it is also, again, we don't want to just play with technology because it's fun, but having a step forward here is about setting the foundations. And one could argue that, you know, no one would have imagined that smartphones would be in the hands of so many people at this point in 2023, but they are. My rickshaw driver in Bangladesh has a smartphone. In the same sense, when we're looking at something like VR, right now it is expensive. It's relatively painful to, you know, wear these VR sets, but all of those things will converge to lower costs and more accessibility. So our approach with the CNIS pilot is putting our foot forward, analyzing what's realistic based on our resources, and then actually building. And our goal will be that by the end of the pilot, we'll actually have a demo day. And in the demo day, hopefully with this group and a larger group, we can demonstrate what was possible in 4 months. And what we want to do is sort of blow this out of the park by showing, for example, that something that would have taken, let's say, 1,000 hours in terms of, let's say, video production was accomplished in 10 hours. And that would be sort of the results approach that we want to then use to take this approach and apply it across all of the digital learning content that CNIS has. So not making it random, but making it very strategic. And our hope is that we can engage with this group to get your feedback, to make sure that we're on course. Obviously, Ron is our main point of contact, but the surgeons here, the admin staff, everybody's feedback would be so welcome as we go through this process over the next 4 months.
Could we have Kathy and Ryan make comments?
Right off the bat, the 3 work streams proposed here seem really interesting. The generative AI stuff, you know, translating your voice into Arabic, I can already see that's a super powerful way to apply these in a not even a theoretical standpoint. It's just directly applicable. And then, you know, I've done my own playing around with ChatGPT for a while, and I can definitely see how translating course materials and populating an LLM with that information would be very useful in a classroom setting. My one thought about the VR AR component of this would be the potential cost of headsets, and so I would wonder how we would approach that in a developing nation. But besides that, I think this is really interesting and exciting.
Thanks, Ryan.
I would say great presentation. I would say to the group, you know, some of the things we've talked about over the last 5 years, the word accelerate, I'm gonna guess, no pressure, that Damon and crew will be ready to demo far before April based on the video they just showed you from a few minutes. No pressure. I would endorse that generative AI is moving very, very quickly. We were in a different place a year from now, so technology is going to move very fast in the next few years. And so it's exciting. Good points, Ryan. And I look forward to the demo.
Yeah, what we hope to do is we hope to show, so we want to do this very agile. And I don't mean that in like the strictest sense of agile developmental methodology, but in the sense of our goal will be to surprise the audience with what was possible in a very short period of time. And that's why we set it as a 4-month pilot instead of 12 months, to really put the pressure. The learning bot, we've already put it into development. So Ryan, you pointed that out. Like it occurred to us, like what would it just take to load course material into a customized ChatGPT, and then you have like companion learning bot. So the idea would be like, it was way before its time, but if some people remember that frustrating paperclip in Microsoft Word or Excel that everybody disabled 15 years ago, it was disabled because it was annoying and useless. But what would it actually mean if you actually had a learning bot where, as let's say a concept is being taught in the context of whatever learning module, I as a student can pause and actually ask the question and get real-time feedback. That learning bot can also be used for dynamic queries that have branching logic to them in relationship to the learner. So the quiz that pops up right now when you're watching a video is hard programmed. So Dr. Led or whoever's the course writer has written the questions and answers. And that stops at a certain point because you only have a finite amount of things that you can do. But with the learning bot, for example, which we need to validate, and that would be very important. It can't be hallucinating, for example, but that learning bot can just go on and on and on. I can keep asking it questions until I, as a student, have confidence in my understanding of whatever that subject was. And in the context of the learning bot itself, it would be siloed to the material that's relevant. So you shouldn't be asking questions about climate change in relationship to trauma team training. So it's not just embedding the ChatGPT, but it's actually embedding something that has been tailored to the learning experience of that person in the course. Ryan, you made a very good point on the VR side. I know that CNIS has done work with virtual reality before. VR is a longer term bet, but it's one of the ones where if we develop some competency and if we can actually reduce the costs associated with it, it has exciting potential for that immersive learning experience. And we also say VR AR. So the distinction being with virtual reality, you have the full headset, the Oculus or the Apple one that's coming up. But with AR, one can imagine glasses that will be roughly 30 or 40 bucks. And those glasses can have a screen which would allow for me to 3D manipulate something. And so the example that we went through with Ron as just schematically would be a craniotomy module. It would obviously be super cool if you actually have the skull in 3 dimensions as you're looking at the screen. And we're looking at, let's say, a trauma as opposed to the static sort of 2D content. So we're putting that as a stretch in the 4 months, but we want to see what's possible in terms of the immersive learning experiences that could be produced.
Actually, on that note, it does occur to me that you could just use a smartphone and use the camera of the smartphone to overlay an image.
Yeah, like surgical training, something that probably some of the surgeons have seen. There's those very expensive VR modules that are now in universities and medical schools and in fellowship and residency programs. We wouldn't be looking necessarily at that sort of that model. It would be more so, how can we actually improve upon the learning experience where right now, if you do go through Moodle or any learning management system, it looks roughly similar to the way it would have looked like 10 years ago. You have video, you have text, you have quizzes, video, text, quizzes. Very different, however, if you can actually imagine a scenario where you really feel there's the other person next to you, like another student. And I can send this later, but one thing that's super fascinating is when you look at an interview between a podcaster, Lex Friedman, and Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Facebook, where literally their person has been recreated in the virtual world, and the facial expressions that the person's expressing through their remote location is perceived by the other person in an immersive setting. Those things are not accessible even to us right now in our context. So to imagine, well, how's that going to end up in Africa? How's that going to end up in, let's say, a university with not a lot of resources in Tanzania? Well, it's all a matter of timing. It will get there. So we want to sort of be at the forefront of pushing those boundaries. And again, one of the objectives would be, how can we unlock new funding from organizations like Meta and the Zuckerberg Foundation, who have an incentive and interest to make it so that these technologies are more widespread in their usage. So that's another parallel objective here.
Yeah, I have one comment on the market in terms of funding, more for the group than anything, is that what we're seeing right now in venture funding with startups is anyone with an AI in their name, strategy, that's where the funding is going for startups. And so by having a proof of concept and a strategy that aligns with a bit of a track record, at least in trying some of these technologies over the years, that the hope would be that would unlock some funding for CNIS also.
Thanks, Kathy. Yeah, that's exactly what we've seen. And again, it's not just about us using the buzzwords, because that's where we'll want to show in the pilot the results to get people excited. And a lot of the organizations, the startups that are working on these cutting edge technologies, they themselves often have a social objective as well. So we can get their support in the context of the types of work that we're doing on this pilot and then beyond the pilot. So the objective on the April 2024 demo day that we would organize is that we would actually try to invite some industry leaders as well. And that would be another objective, which is to see how can we then take this to the next level. I will point out that Matt and myself, Matt's not on the call, so I hope I don't get in trouble once he listens to this. We ourselves are one of the funding sources for this. And I think we can put a material amount of funding towards it. What we want, though, is to make sure that it's achieving the goals of CNIS in terms of its strategic objectives for the year and beyond, not just sort of getting the wow factor. Our real mission here in terms of our contribution of time and even financial resources is, how can we make it so that if 100 students were reached on, let's say, a course in the preceding state, how can we get it to, let's say, 50,000 students? I'm just making that up, of course, but that scale objective is really our goal, which means that we can't be left alone. We need to have this direct feedback loop with this team to make sure that we're going in the right direction to the needs of the learners and the instructors for that matter.